You, windows down, air conditioning. 70 degrees. Smooth.
Wayne's just coming up.
Okay. You saw him coming.
Saw him walking. Yeah, but I haven't seen Mr. Bunny. I have not seen him yet.
And I didn't do it. For once, it wasn't me. Okay, I show it's 3 o'clock. I'm going to start the meeting by reading our mission statement first and our vision statement. The Northwest Regional Airport Authority strives to be a major driver of economic growth in northern Michigan and provide world-class service to build prosperity. Our vision statement, the Cherry Capital Airport is to be the airport of choice for all residents and visitors of Northwest Michigan. Please rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Mr. Secretary.
Beach now.
Here.
Bunnick. DeYoung.
Present.
Henschel.
Here.
Junkoff.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
O'Rourke. Palmondon.
Present.
Schmidt.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Review and approval of the agenda. I want to propose a change. I'd like to move item 3, which is the National Cherry Festival Air Show Agreement, to number 1 under unfinished business.
I'll make a motion with that change.
Moved and supported. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Thank you. Public comments on anything pertaining to the agenda. I would like to make a note here. What I am proposing is we will hold public comment after the board's presentation regarding the air show agreement. I think some questions and comments may be answered by the presentation, and we'll give ample time. We'll use our standard public comment rules. We'll ask you to stand, identify yourself, give your address, and maintain 3 minutes, please, for everyone's cooperation. Any questions on that? I believe we have an introduction we'd like to make at this time, correct?
I'd like to introduce Don Williams. He's the Assistant Federal Security Director for TSA. He is joining us, being in Detroit for
Last 5 years of my way of Alaska.
There you go. So he replaces Craig LaFoyle that was here. So I think it's day 2.
Day 2.
Day 2.
Welcome, Don.
Welcome. Thank you. Okay, are there any other public comments pertaining to items on the agenda? If you're here to speak about the air show and you have a time constraint, we would entertain that at this point. Hearing none. Reading and approval of the minutes. We have the January 30th minutes that have been presented.
Move to approve the minutes as presented for January 30th regular meeting and annual meeting. Support.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Meeting from the Executive Committee meeting on February 16th. Any
I move to accept the executive committee meeting minutes.
support? Moved and supported. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Consent calendar. The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one authority motion without discussion. Any member of the authority, staff, or the public may ask that an item on the consent calendar be removed and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, received, and filed or approved is approved by one single authority action adopting the consent calendar. We have nothing to receive and file. Before you, you have for approval items A through H. Is there anyone that would like any of those removed from the consent calendar?
Motion to approve the consent calendar as presented. Support motion.
Moved in support. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Reading of communications. We don't have any apparently at this point, correct?
Well, the MDOT has not released their passenger statistic data, so I'll just refer you back to the ops report that's at the back. For the month of February, total passenger movements for the month of February compared to February 23 is up 15.8%. For the year to date, we're up 9.3% for passenger movements.
Another good year started. Thank you. Committee assignments. I believe I told everyone who moved committees, you've got a copy of the committee assignments proposed for 2024. Anyone have any questions, comments? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move the committee appointments as presented.
Support.
Moved and supported. Further discussion? Hearing none, all of those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Notice of intent to award the 2024 Air Service Revitalization Program.
This program is something we worked hard with the Michigan Association of Airport Executives to get Michigan to pass an initial $5 million in funds to support air service development. Last year in the governor's budget that was put into, they used ARPA funds to make that happen. And so they started in the fall seeking input on how to run the program. The Michigan Department of Transportation did. And so we worked through all those with an offering or pre-application due in February, and then a final application due once the intent of award is approved by the Michigan Aeronautics Commission. We have been part of that group. They're offering $750,000 to offset the cost for Charlotte's service going from weekend only to daily this summer. So the opportunity to support that is great. So we'll finish that application, looking for final approval from MDOT on March 20th.
Any questions or comments? I will move on at that point to, we have no standing committee reports, no special committee reports, unfinished business. Again, item 3 that's been moved to 1. Cherry
Certainly.
Festival Air Show Agreement. I'm assuming there's some people here to hear this. I'm guessing. Thank you for coming.
With that said, in your packet is a memo that I provided outlining kind of the chronological order of everything that's taking place. So we'll touch base on that, and then I'll have Ms. Stites give a little presentation on what has been proposed and what has been discussed. The National Cherry Festival has requested permission to use TVC for the air show. Based on the airport experiences from the 22-23 air show results and how that took place, we noticed significant interference with the normal operation of the airport and temporary closure of the airport for those air shows. In such cases, the NRARR board's special events policy and federal regulations require an agreement to use at the airport. And I want to point out that the National Cherry Festival has contacted the FAA, and the FAA has informed their executive director, Kat Pay, that they do require an agreement. Additionally, the special events policy and the federal regulations require the airport to file a ground operation plan in conjunction with Cherry Festival's filing a request for the certificate of waiver of authorization. Due to the high performance acts of the National Cherry Festival, and that includes a temporary flight restriction or TFR, will also be required that will essentially close the airspace around TVC during the high performance act while they're performing. This results in significant impacts to our air carriers schedules during the air show, as well as the multiple days leading up to the air show. As a result, it is necessary for the air carriers to schedule for these four days to be what's called deconflicted. The airport has typically done this for the air show over the years. And what the challenge has come up with is over the years since I've been doing this, and I want to point out, I think this is 18th or 19th air show for the Cherry Festival. Done about 24 different air shows. And what usually comes up in this case is over the years, we've had lots of gaps, 45 minutes, half hour, sometimes even when you go back to the early 2000s, we had one flight. Today, we're averaging a flight about every 5 minutes. And so it requires a lot of deconfliction efforts to be done. And the airport engages in that because the airlines want to work with the airport. TVC has engaged in numerous discussions with the Cherry Festival regarding the air show. In October of 23, we expressed concern that the air show requiring extended closures of the airspace to the air carrier operations in and out of TVC would result in significant negative impacts on passenger traffic and operations at the airport, considering the anticipated schedule for the summer of 24, as well as the experiences of 2022 and 2023. This was again discussed with the National Cherry Festival in December after they attended ICAST and in January 2024. The National Cherry Festival disregarded our discussion and continued to secure performers that would result in the harm to the traveling public. In January 2024, the airport made clear that an agreement would be needed to be entered into that would address these concerns while allowing the air show to proceed. On February 1st, 2024, following the board meeting on January 30th, at the direction of the board, an agreement for the use of the airport by the Cherry Festival outlining the conditions for such use was presented after being presented from the board for its consideration. The proposed agreement for the National Cherry Festival permits the use of the airport for the Cherry Festival Air Show pursuant to Grant Assurance 22, the conditions for the use of the airport and the agreement necessary for a safe and efficient operation of the airport. The condition includes the prescribed time periods to use the airport for the air show operations that result in the closure of the airport to the air carrier traffic. Other conditions in the agreement are to mitigate the increased liability risk for the airport as the result of the air show and the significant additional cost to the airport to ensure the airport remains as self-sustaining as possible pursuant to the Grant Assurance 24. On February 13th, representatives from the Cherry Festival and the airport met to discuss the agreement. After those discussions, the airport was revised to further accommodate the Cherry Festival's use of the airport by the air show by offering additional days and times for the circle arrival of the Blue Angels for 2024. The addition of the high-speed aircraft in operations in 25 and the Blue Angels in 2026. And the requirement that the National Chariot Festival perform a feasibility study for consideration of future years. Between the time the agreement was presented, hold on one second. The revised agreement was presented on the 16th for the Chariot Festival approval. I also met on Sunday, February 25th, with the National Chariot Festival's Executive Director, Kat Pay, and Trevor Tkach to discuss the agreement as presented. Between the time the agreement was presented in the National Chariot Festival and my meeting with the Executive Director, someone from, quote unquote, the TVC Air Show reached out to Sun Country Airlines indicating that some of their scheduled flights conflicted with the 2024 Air Show. The misrepresentation of the airport to Sun Country and as later determined contact with all carriers caused confusion as the carriers complained that it was the airport asking to adjust these schedules. I immediately contacted the National Chariot Festival Executive Director and let her know about the issue to cease and desist before harm to TVC's air service could happen. She indicated to the National Chariot Festival would investigate and follow up. The National Chariot Festival has acknowledged that they did contact the airlines, confirming TVC's investigation that the National Chariot Festival was the source of the communication. On Saturday, March 2nd, 2024, the National Chariot Festival provided the airport with an entirely different agreement in the form of a memorandum of understanding, which was unacceptable, for several reasons. Most importantly, it does not allow the airport to operate for its primary purpose as an FAR Part 139 airport. The format of the air show the NCF has discussed, or the Chariot Festival has discussed, would impact nearly 70 flights or one full day of airline operations. However, the proposed agreement from the airport only impacts 6 operations. I did discuss this MOU with the National Chariot Festival Executive Director at the time and informed that it was unacceptable. She then requested a few minor changes to the airport proposed agreement, which were made. This was emailed to the National Chariot Festival at the end of day on March 5th. The Chariot Festival was asked to execute the agreement by 5 p.m. on Thursday, March 7th, so that could be included in today's board meeting, regular meeting agenda. Otherwise, the request would be considered withdrawn. The National Chariot Festival on March 7th would not execute the agreement, but was not withdrawn its request to use the airport. Under the airport's event policy, the National Chariot Festival may submit an application for the event up to 60 business days prior to the air show. In the event that the agreement with the National Chariot Festival to use the airport for the air show is entered into, it's anticipated that the National Chariot Festival will proceed with submitting the FAA Form 7711-2 for a waiver for the air show to FSDO. And the airport will prepare and submit an air show event ground operations plan to the Airport Certification Office, Great Lakes Division, and the Airport District's Office, Detroit. If the FSDO issues the 7711-1, it is anticipated that the Chariot Festival will apply for the TFR, extending or creating the 5 nautical miles, protecting the Blue Angels and the other demonstration aircraft. The TFR will prohibit air carriers from entering this airspace and restrict operations to and from the airport during its effective time. In the event that the TFR is issued, TVC will be temporarily closed to aircraft operations, not permitted during the Blue Angels operation as required per their support manual. If an agreement is not entered into, the National Chariot Festival will not be authorized to use the airport for the air show. TVC will not prepare and submit an air show event ground operations plan. In the event the National Chariot Festival does submit a 7711-2 waiver, it's anticipated per 5190.6b without an air show event ground plan, the 7711-1 will not be issued. As a result, no TFR will be issued. This matter was discussed with the Great Lakes Federal an aviation administrator, Erica Mend, at our MAA conference. Staff was all there. Board member Schmidt was in attendance. So we're following the guidance from the regional administrator on what we're supposed to be doing. And at that time, he has indicated if there's no agreement, if there's no event plan, they will not issue the TFR. So currently, there is no action to be taken by the board. It's up to the Cherry Festival to submit an application pursuant to the events policy. I'd like to turn over to Carrie to kind of walk through the agreement.
Thank you. So in the first question, I think that's been asked or that's come up in this whole discussion is whether we need an agreement. I think there was some disagreement between the parties, whether we need an agreement. It's the National Cherry Festival's position that we don't need an agreement. However, it's our position that we do need an agreement. And the basis for our position is that, first of all, the FAA Airports Division Office, who is responsible for ensuring that we meet our grant insurances, told us that we need an agreement. Secondly, Grant Assurance 22A, H, and I requires us to allow the airport to be used by the public, but it also allows us to provide reasonable rules in connection with the public's use of the airport in order to prevent interference with our operations, to ensure the efficiency of the airport's operations, and to ensure the traveling public are not interfered with. We do have such reasonable rules and regulations. We have rules and regulations and ordinances. Section 500.20 of our ordinance provides that a special event may not be held at the airport except pursuant to the board's policy. This board has a special events policy, which was amended on January 30th to allow for the Cherry Festival, the air show, to operate here at the airport. Before we amended the special events policy on January 30th, as we discussed on January 30th, the Cherry Festival's air show could not have operated on the airport because our special events policy specifically said that if a special event interferes with operations at the airport, if it's determined by the CEO that is the case, then it cannot operate at the airport. So on January 30th, in order to allow the air show, we amended the special events policy to say such an event could happen provided that there is an agreement to do so. And that is why we have an agreement in front of the Cherry Festival today for the air show, so they can use the airport for the air show. And additionally, an agreement is needed because they come through the fence to use the airport. They come through the fence via the NMC property, and they come through the fence via the Coast Guard property. The regulations for the FAA tell us that through the fence operations are not preferred. However, they can be allowed pursuant to an agreement. And that is also another reason why we're requiring an agreement for the Cherry Festival to use, to have an agreement to use the airport. And I understand that we disagree on that. That is the Cherry Festival's legal position, and our legal position is that we do need an agreement. However, the good news is that we do agree on one thing, and that is that we should work together to try to put together an agreement as good neighbors to allow the air show, because I think we all, both sides, want the air show to happen, and our agreement allows the air show to happen. Or we think that our agreement allows the airport or the air show to happen. However, the Cherry Festival believes that our agreement does not allow the air show to happen. And we would like to know why the Cherry Festival thinks that our agreement does not allow the air show to happen. Because the way that we have written it, it allows for the Blue Angels operations between certain periods of time. Those certain periods of time were selected to basically by policy of the board to ensure that the primary purpose of the airport of normal and routine aeronautical activities continue to occur as much as possible on the airport while the air show is occurring. An air show is not a normal and routine aeronautical activity. By FAA regulation 5190.6B, which provides airports guidance in meeting its grant assurances, an air show is in fact a special event. It is not a normal and routine aeronautical activity. So in order to meet our grant assurance that we allow for airport operations on the airport, we need to have an agreement to allow airport operations on the airport while allowing the air show. We have a term in the agreement for 3 years. And the reason why we have the term of the agreement for 3 years is that this allows for certainty for both parties, so that both parties can plan on the air show for the next 3 years. The airport can plan for the air show and scheduling air carrier operations in 2025 and 2026. The National Cherry Fest can plan for the next couple of years when they go to ICAS and schedule their acts. So we won't end up here again back in 2025 and 2026. That is the intent of the 3-year agreement. It's not legally required that we have a 3-year agreement. It's just suggested in order to make sure, or hopefully, so we don't end up here again next year and the year after, and so on and so forth. And looking at just a second. The Airport Cooperative Research Program publication on conducting aeronautical special events at airports. It is highly recommended that planning 1 year or more in advance is very important. The best advice, according to one survey participant, the best advice I was to receive was probably to start work a year before the event to try to start trying to plan deconfliction, ground operations plan, emergency plans, etc. And in order to do that, to start in that far in advance, you need a multi-year agreement. That is what's suggested. Is it legally required? No, it's not legally required, but it's would be ideal for both parties to have certainty. But if that is a sticking point, I mean, certainly something that, but we don't know whether that's the sticking point with the Cherry Festival. With respect to the time of operations, we have modified the agreement from its original form, which did not have in the agreement the time for the circle and arrival of the Blue Angels. Now our agreement allows that time on either Wednesday or Thursday morning before the show for that circle and arrival time. And that was our understanding that all was necessary by the Cherry Festival. However, we do understand that they want the A10 and that they have proposed a D-shaped TFR or a limited TFR for the A10. We talked to air traffic control about that D shape, and the air traffic control has provided us with its thoughts on the safety of that D shape. And it's something that the airport is willing to work with the Cherry Festival on limited TFR for the A10 if that is what the Cherry Festival would like. However, as we sit here today, we do not know whether that is what the Cherry Festival would like, because the Cherry Festival has not provided any indication that that is what they need out of this agreement in order for this air show to work. Additionally, we are unclear whether the A10 can operate with that D-shaped TFR, because according to the A10's operations manual, they normally do require that 5 nautical mile radius TFR. However, if the Cherry Festival has worked with the A10 to do the D shape in the form and the manner that the air traffic control has indicated would be safe, the airport sits here ready to work with the Cherry Festival on that issue, if that's the issue that they would like to discuss. So as I said, the Cherry Festival for 2020, or the air show for 2024, as allowed under this agreement, is in the form that the air show has been provided to the public for countless years that the Blue Angels have been flying. We are willing to discuss the A10 and the D shape for the A10 for the 2025 and 2026 air shows. Our agreement proposes what we view to be a collaborative process for the airport and the National Cherry Festival to meet by certain dates to discuss what aircraft operations the Cherry Fest Air Show would like to utilize for their upcoming air show. So they have the airport and the Cherry Festival have a preliminary understanding of what those are when the Cherry Festival goes to ICAST in order to book those shows. So there will be no surprises on the Cherry Festival's end and the airport's end. And by the time we get to January, February, when we have to start planning the show in earnest, start deconflicting, work with our air carriers to adjust their schedules to accommodate the air show. And that's essentially what the provisions for the 2025 and 2026 air show are meant to reflect or convey to the Cherry Festival, is that we want to work with you in a collaborative process. So we're all on the same page when it comes to the next air show and how that's going to affect the operations of the airport. And so we can minimize that impact as much as possible. I've discussed that particular provision with the air show's attorney and have indicated that we would be happy to discuss language that they would feel is, if they feel that that is not clearly intended by the agreement, and the language in the agreement, language that would make it clear to them that that's what's intended by those provisions. The fees and costs section of the agreement. Basically, these fees and costs are to comply with 5190.6B, section 7.21C, which indicates that the airport should charge its fees and costs in connection with special events on the airport. Additionally, we have grant assurance 20, which is it
24.
24, which allows us to charge reasonable fees and costs for the use of the airport. And additionally, we also have our grant assurance that prohibits revenue diversion. Revenue diversion basically indicates that we need to use airport revenue for the purpose of operating the airport. We have been utilizing our staff to assist with the operation of the air show, which is, it's not our air show, it's the National Cherry Festival's air show. So in order to meet that grant assurance with respect to revenue diversion, we need to make sure that we recover our costs in connection with the air show, which we have indicated in the agreement can be either a direct payment or through an in-kind sponsorship agreement. And that is not at the unilateral direction of the airport. It is based on negotiations with the Cherry Festival. The Cherry Festival has offered us a sponsorship package which does, I think, meet that are discussed in this agreement. It was, however, provided in connection with a memorandum of understanding agreement that we have told the Cherry Festival is unacceptable. So the sponsorship agreement in and of itself wasn't rejected. It was the memorandum of agreement. However, the sponsorship agreement, if that's something they would like to propose in connection with meeting the financial obligations, it's certainly something that is contemplated by this. The feasibility study is basically to allow us to consider and plan for future events. And this is also highly recommended by the ACRP bulletin that I just referenced in Appendix B, that that in the timeline of an air show, one of the things that should occur following an air show is the analysis of the success of the air show and the impact and economic impact analysis of the air show, to make sure that you're answering the question, why? Why are you having an air show? Asking what are the benefits of the air show? What are the potential impacts of the air show? So when you go forward with future air shows, you can maximize the benefits and reduce the detriments to with the most information possible. And that is the purpose of the feasibility study, and it allows us that mechanism to consider future air shows. The agreement also requires insurance in the amount of $10 million with the airport named as an additional insured. That's generally consistent with the previous agreements we've had with the air show. It's also consistent with at least one other agreement for an air show that I have looked at, that $10 million requirement. And it's also very accurate and reflective of the risk of an air show and the potential damages that are out there and liability with respect to an air show. An air show is a big event with big airplanes going very fast with a lot of people watching, and there's a risk involved with that, which the Cherry Festival has previously found reasonable, and I believe they continue to find reasonable as it was in their proposed alternative agreement, and substantially the same. There's also the indemnification obligation, which requires them to defend, indemnify, and hold harmless the NRAA. This is also consistent with the previous agreements with the airport, as well as consistent with other agreements for the air show. And I believe that there's no issue with the Cherry Festival on that, because largely the indemnification provision was in substantially the same form in their proposed agreement. NCF's contractors and performance requires them to provide us with insurance, with us being named as an additional insured. This was in the previous agreement with the National Cherry Festival for the air show. There is an addition that we would like to ensure that all permitted aircraft operations are appropriately insured. This is not unlike any other operator or lessee at the airport, where we want to make sure that the aircraft are appropriately insured if they're on the airport. It recites that they'll comply with our events policy, since the events policy is what allows the air show to operate and be on the airport, and it contains non-discrimination and AIP required provisions in order to comply with our grant assurances, and provides for a default provision so that the airport has a mechanism to enforce the terms of the agreement. Additionally, the airport manager, or the CEO as an airport manager, has the inherent right to operate the airport and ensure that it's in safe operation, and shut down an activity on the airport that is considered unsafe or interfering with operations at the airport. That's also in our ordinances. And to be clear, our requirement that the air show operate on the airport in such a way as to not interfere with the operations of the airport is consistent with the obligation everyone who operates on the airport has. It's in all of our leases, it's in our ordinances. That is just a requirement. And what we're trying to do is make sure that the air show does operate in the airport in a way that doesn't interfere with other airport operations, consistent with our grant assurance obligations and our obligation as an airport, public use airport, and our primary purpose of normal day-to-day operations of the airport.
So just to touch on the last 2 points, what Carrie has read. When we look at the 5190.6B and looking at the closure part of the airport and the requirements, it's pointed out on the last one that the airport sponsor is to be reimbursed for all additional costs incurred as a result of the event. It's in the regulation. So we've made an opportunity for that to be offset by the sponsorship agreement. We've done that for years. We don't see any change in doing something differently. But I also want to point out Grant Assurance 22, because when you look at that grant assurance, it's about preventing discrimination of all users. So if we choose to, close the airport, then you're discriminating against your other users. So we got to make sure we have balance in all that. So at the end of the Grant Assurance 22, there is the statement that says the sponsor may prohibit or limit any given type, kind, or class of aeronautical use of the airport if such action is necessary for the safe operation of the airport or necessary to serve the civil aviation needs of the public. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That was a lot. I guess I'd like to summarize that I have never heard any board member or staff member say they would like to see the air show go away. I've never heard that. Have people said that we feel the air show needs to adapt to our current mode of operation? Absolutely. I go back to 1 year, as Kevin said, where over the 3-hour window, proposed air show, there were 6 commercial operations over that 3-hour time frame. We have changed tremendous amount in a very short period of time. And we're trying to reach a balance so that both entities, which have great products, obviously the Cherry Festival has been a very successful event. Air show is probably one of the top events. And I think we have a similar story to tell. You look at our growth over the years, we've done an outstanding job of growing our business. I still feel there is a way for us to mutually come together and reach an agreement. With that, I would turn it over to questions to anyone on the board, to Carrie, Kevin, myself, before we open the public comment. Mr. Hutchins.
I'll comment. It really looks like we're in the home stretch. January 30th, I'll read this from our minutes that we just approved. It was moved by Doug DeYoung and supported by Rob Henschel to approve resolution 2024-20 to forward a consent and agreement to use the airport property to the National Cherry, that's the word is missing, with understanding the CEO, chair, and designated airport staff work with the National Cherry Festival to reach an agreement to present at March 12th, as today, regular meeting. All right, we missed that deadline. We didn't reach an agreement. I think that's not on one party, that's on all of us. I'm curious where things broke down and the discussion stopped. And I understand Kevin said, well, if you don't sign this by this date, then we'll consider it as done. That might not be the best posture to reach an agreement. So, and I'm not going to say anybody's innocent, but I think we all are struggling to come to the same page. I see, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the Cherry Festival, but on our side, it looks like possibly a 3-year agreement could be a sticking point. The A10 and the D shape might be a sticking point. The feasibility study might be a sticking point. The wording of the insurance and indemnity might be a sticking point. I think that should get worked out. And the wording of conditions under which the CEO can cancel the show. That might be a sticking point that needs to be worked on. I think these are all things that we can reach an agreement on. We might not all like it, but can you kind of help us understand the timeline of where this broke down? How did we end up at this meeting without having reached an agreement?
Well, we made several offers to meet, and so we met on February 13th, which included Cat Pay and Mike Mietersma from the Cherry Festival. We had a productive meeting. Steve, you might be able to comment better on that. They asked for some changes. We made the changes that they requested, and we sent a new agreement back. Met again on February 25th. Cat Pay and I did. We talked about the agreement extent. There are some things that are regulatory that we can't change. Those are some things that they would like changed. The airport, they talk about airspace. And so I think there's a differentiation between the two in that discussion. So the impacts overall need to be considered. I think that's the biggest challenge is the civil, serving the civil aviation needs of the public. Cherry Festival is very focused on the festival needs. It's our duty to serve everybody. And I think that's where the breakdown is.
So in the communications between the leadership of Cherry Festival and the leadership of this airport, why didn't we keep talking?
We're open to keep talking. It's there. We asked for them to make a decision so we could report to the board what that decision was on the agreement. But the door is open per our event policy to resubmit, to even take the current agreement that's in place, redline it, send it back. It's in their court to let us know. We're here listening.
I respectfully disagree. If someone's being childish and I'm dealing with them, I'm still the adult in the room. We gave you instructions to reach an agreement. That doesn't mean leave the ball in their court.
Mr. Beach now?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Rob, I disagree with how you framed that. Steve, and from my perspective as an RAA member, you just brought up some points that you mentioned, 4 or 5 points that might be a sticking point. I don't think that's ever been brought forth by the NCF. And I find it, when you're in good faith negotiations on an agreement and then pick up a press release. I'm a member of the Northwest Regional Airport Authority. I, from Gaylord, take that responsibility seriously and respectfully represent, this is Traverse City Airport, but I'm the guy from Gaylord, so I represent the region. It's not just, it says TDC. This is the Regional Airport Authority. That's why I'm here. But when I pick up and I see a press release that talks about baseless terms being levied by NCF against an authority I'm on, I've not levied any baseless terms. I've not seen anything that's indicated when we presented an agreement to them that's never been shared back in a negotiating mechanism that's fair and equitable and allows us to respond. But I see it in the news. I'm offended by that. When I see words that say the NCF has brought countless visitors, yes, to Northern Michigan, while limiting the day-to-day impact, and our CEO and staff tells us we're limiting the impact on the infrastructure. These are our professionals, and I think we need to stand by our staff when they're stressed by our directives to increase air service from nonstop cities across the U.S. And put this in, when I see this in a press release, that causes me concern. And then the final item that I see in here is that says that we are limiting restrictions in terms that would make the air show impossible. Clearly, our legal counsel and Kevin prepared an agreement, certainly doesn't make it impossible. I have better faith in them that they presented a fair, good faith agreement, and none of those specific items have come back to me as an authority member that says this is impossible. Have we received any suggestions other than we don't like it, we want an MOU? Have we received anything that says this is impossible?
Actually, if you look at their communication on March 7th, they do list 4 items towards the bottom.
And then the last one, obviously, there's some back and forth on that we don't have authority that we're exceeding our authority in control of airspace. I think Kevin, you mentioned that. We don't have authority over the airspace, we do have authority over the airport.
Correct.
So I just see this as unfortunate. The Cherry Festival, amazingly successful over the years, and the airport, amazingly successful over the years. I don't think anyone's doing anything to be penalizing or be bad or cause a bad situation. I think legitimately, when we talked in January, Kevin in October was very fair and said, hey, we got some problems, guys. We got to get this worked out. We're not going to be able to operate the way we're doing. So we have more nonstops. We have 6 airlines now. We're the 3rd busiest airport in Michigan. We got to come do it. We're going to have to, can't do business as usual, which is, I think is very smart. But I don't think the NRAA has been punitive. I don't think we're trying to be difficult. We're trying to, number one, assure the safety of every aircraft that comes into this airport, every passenger that's now coming in that's serving the region, not just Traverse City. So I don't think anyone's trying to be unfair or punitive. I think we're in a situation where we got 2 very successful organizations that kind of had an impasse here. I've been impressed with the Cherry Festival's level of professionalism. Of course, our staff, Kevin, I think we're at an impasse, and I hate to see things go outside of the good faith negotiations, and it seems as though things have gone public, and that's putting everyone in somewhat of an awkward situation. I don't know. I haven't seen anything that they said, look, we buy this.
Mr. DeYoung?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the air show, and I think we need to sit down and figure out how to make this work. And I think there's a number of questions that I have. First of all, is will the FAA approve a D-shaped TFR, limited or whatever we're calling it, TFR? Is that a possibility? And is that a possibility moving forward in any agreement for years to come that would have a limited impact, if or no impact, on flights coming in and out during the time that we would be operating in that D-shape? So I think that needs to go to the FAA, and we need to get some guidance from the FAA on whether that would be approved or not, because I think that's a big opportunity for both organizations to sit down and discuss. I do have some questions in regards to, I understand the FAA controls the airspace. We all know that. I know that the airport manager controls, the airport. It is common that airport managers, correct me if I'm wrong, Kerry, but it is common if the airport managers across the country can shut the airport down if there is an unsafe or dangerous situation. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
So they wouldn't shut it down just because they don't want a plane to take off. They would shut it down because it is an unsafe or dangerous situation. If we need to rewrite the agreement to make that clear, then let's rewrite the agreement to make that clear. The FAA can close the airspace at any time. And they too would close the airspace. We can't close the airspace. They would close the airspace if there were an unsafe or dangerous situation. They would stop a plane from taking off if it were unsafe or dangerous. They have that authority to do so. So I think everybody needs to understand, we're not asking for anything out of the ordinary there, and maybe it just needs to be reworded and rewritten so that everybody understands what that requirement is and what those parameters are around that. As far as some of these other things, I think we're close on a number of these things. I didn't see anything from the air show in regards to, the insurance issue. I didn't see anything from them in regards to recovering our costs through the sponsorship agreement. As a matter of fact, I think actually in the MOU, they actually increased from the previous year's sponsorship agreement. So I think there are some positives here that we can take away. But we have to figure out a way to operate as an airport and move people in and out of here on a daily basis, which is a good thing. We're the third largest airport in the state. We've exceeded expectations in the last 5 years. I've been on this commission for now over close to 10 years, and we've exceeded expectations in the 10 years I've been on this commission and this authority. I believe that we can move forward. We just need to sit in a room together and hammer it out. And if we need to bring a mediator in to help us, let's bring a mediator in to help us. But I think this is good for our community to have both organizations successful. And we have to figure out a way to make both organizations successful.
I can try and answer your D-shaped question, Mr. DeYoung. I actually reached out late last week to Air Combat Command. They actually do the assignments for the TAC demos and describe to them what we actually proposed to the Cherry Festival. And in particular, this year, the demo pilot, she's a second year pilot. So he said it's absolutely doable. It just needs to be requested. And he's not heard anything. Now, I've not had any direct conversation with anyone from the Cherry Festival or the air show, despite reaching out to several of them and getting no responses. But it's very doable. It would entail the cooperation of local ATC and FSDO when they sign off on a waiver. But it's certainly doable, and I feel it's able to be done in a very safe manner. The other advantage we have, that's a relatively short performance. So historically, what was done is we would know the Blue Angels and Thunderbirds timeline, the requirements. We would then look at any other tactical demos we had, and we would slot those in the least conflicting times of the airport schedule. Yes, on occasion, the airport management was successful in reaching out to our airlines and saying, hey, can we push this airplane 5 minutes early? Or can we get it here 10 minutes early? So there was cooperation back and forth between the air show and the airport to make it happen. Bear in mind, there were many less flights. In today's schedule, again, if you look at it, it's more challenging. Sure.
I understand that, Mr. Chair. I just want to at least get before the FAA and say, would this work? Could we continue to launch planes from here, have passengers up, need to get to the destinations they need to get to and arrive here to enjoy the Cherry Festival and any other Northern Michigan event. The other question I had was, I do believe a multi-year agreement is the right way to go. I think it's best for both organizations to have. I think it affects both organizations. After you're trying to come to terms and come to decisions, it also allows them to understand if they do get permission for a D-shape, and we can continue a D-shape. We might be able to have other high-performance planes here and follow that same pattern if they're allowed. And it gives them the opportunity to pick the right performance planes that can meet the D-shaped or limited TFR. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't like the Chariot Festival. I love the Chariot Festival. I don't like the air show. I love the air show. I want this to happen. I'm really hoping that this impasse can be broken. So if the Chariot Festival were to sign the agreement that they have today, there would be an air show in 2024 with the Blue Angels. And I'm not suggesting that you have to sign that agreement. But we assigned our board chair, Mr. Commandant, and our CEO, Kevin Klein, and his administrative team to negotiate with the Chariot Festival, whoever they assign to negotiate. Those negotiations have broken down. I believe that our team is ready to work with the Chariot Festival. Mr. Commandant had a 30-year history with the air show.
Roughly. Yes.
Roughly, as past director, you have a great advocate for the air show and our board chair, and a very knowledgeable advocate. There's no one else on this board that can understand the intricacies of the air show and the air show's need than Mr. Commandant, who's also our board chair. But he has responsibilities, legal FAA. FAA is not known for being jokesters and loosey-goosey on stuff. We have to follow FAA requirements. We have internal law and FAA requirements that we have to follow. And our CEO has been directed to follow those, and he's criminally liable if they aren't followed. So we have our attorney to help with this. I would ask the Chariot Festival come to the table. Last Thursday, I can't tell you how disappointed I was when I saw the headline of a press release that came from a downstate firm, the future of the Chariot Festival air show at risk. I felt like at that point, this is my feeling, at that point, Chariot Festival, for whatever reason, right or wrong, took this to the public, to the press, to work it out. The press isn't able to work out an agreement between us. The public is not able to work out an agreement between us. Let's the airport and the Chariot Festival work out an agreement between us. Because as I said, I love the air show and I love the Chariot Festival. I want this to happen. And Mr. Commandant is right. There's no one in this organization that's trying to prevent the air show and the high performance air show portion of Blue Angels and Thunderbirds from happening. I implore us all to please sit down and work together and let's get this thing figured out, because I can't wait to watch Blue Angels fly over this community. And that's what the public wants to see. That's what I think the public is going to see. So let's get there.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Okay, we'll open it up to public comments at this point. Again, I'd like to remind you, we'd ask you to come to the podium, identify yourself, give us your address. I also want to make sure that you direct your comments to me. This is not an opportunity to direct comments to the other board members nor any of the staff. So again, we'll expect you to adhere to your 3-minute timeline, and we're ready to go.
Good afternoon, Mr. Commandant. Mike Meinersma, 120 Prairie Hill Drive, New York City, Michigan. Ordinance 684. Good afternoon. Again, Mike Meinersma, and I'm providing comment on behalf of the National